Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another 4-part harmony tutorial video. Today we are looking at secondary substitutes, specifically chords 6 and 2, and we're going to be dealing with a basic guide and introduction and their application next to their respective primary triads. I hope this video helps you, and let's just get straight into it. Alright, so the first thing we need to understand is the actual term secondary substitute. What does it mean? Well, essentially what it means is that we're talking in this case about the secondary chords of a given key and the fact that we can use it as a substitute for a primary triad. So, in this example here we are in the key of G major. And what we should do, as always, is deal with the basic triad first before we move on to 4-part harmony. So, the first secondary substitute we have is chord 6, and that is a substitute for chord 1. So we'll get down in G major chord 1, the basic triad, and that is G, B, and D. Our next chord, in this case now, is the secondary substitute for chord 1, and that is chord 6. And I'll show you in a second why that is. But the basic triad for chord 6 in G major is E, G, B. Now the reason why chord 6 can be used as a substitute for chord 1 is for two reasons, and that is that they both share two notes in common between the two chords. Those notes in this case being G and B. Another reason why it works so well is because the bass notes, or the lowest notes, are literally a third apart from one another. So that is our first secondary substitute. The next example that we can look at is the primary triad chord 4, and its secondary substitute, which would be chord 2. So chord 4 in G major would be C, E, and G. And chord 2 in G major, A, C, and E. Again, the same principle applies here. They share two notes in common, this time the notes C and E, and they too have a bass note or a root note that is a third apart from each other. So as a result, we can use chord 2 as a substitute for chord 4 and chord 6 as a substitute for chord 1. Now in later videos we'll actually deal with this in practice with regards to chord progressions. For example, if you have, and I'll just write it down here, if you have a chord progression going something like 1, 4, 5, 1, we can actually insert our substitutes or replace the given chords that those substitutes apply to. But that is for a later video. Let's keep things nice and simple. Okay, so for this next section, I'm going to actually make use of my trusty Windows notepad over here. And we're going to discuss the rules for doubling in our secondary chords. Now, you may ask yourself, why am I discussing this? Well, when we start dealing with more expansive chord progressions in later videos, when we start inserting things like secondary chords or replacing primary triads with their secondary substitutes, we need to make sure that we understand the doubling rules for those given chords. So for chord 2 and chord 6 in root position, we want to double the root or the third if it results in better voice leading. What does voice leading mean? I'll get to that in a second. For our next rule, we're dealing now with chord 2 in first inversion, or chord 6 in first inversion. And in this case, we want to double the third as far as possible, but we can double fifth or the root if again it results in better voice leading. So what do they mean, or what do I mean when I talk about voice leading, horizontal voice leading? We've dealt with this before, right in the beginning of this tutorial series, especially when we were talking about cadences. But essentially what it means is, how do we move from one chord to the next in 4-part harmony? How does the bass resolve to its next bass note, the tenor, the alto, the soprano, etc.? We follow basic rules like this in terms of doubling so that we can keep things moving nice and steady, so that voice parts are not leaping and jumping all over the show, and also that we avoid parallel fifths and octaves. Alright, in our final segment of this video, we're going to quickly have a look at our secondary substitutes in practice, and we're going to stick to the key of G major. And the first thing I'm going to do now is do chord 1 followed by its secondary substitute, chord 6, and we'll do this one in root position. So here we're going to double our root, or potentially our third if it will result in better voice leading from chord 1. And then for the next bar, I will do chord 4 followed by its secondary substitute of chord 2. Now this is actually a pretty standard progression right here, 1, 6, 4, 2, and I've decided to go 2 in first inversion so we can apply that rule. And usually something like this would be followed by 5, 1, especially towards the end of a piece, or potentially 5, 6 and carrying on, etc., etc. But I would like rather to treat them bar by bar for now so that we can just see them in practice. So chord 1 would be GBD, the triad. So I'm going to go ahead, put the G in the bass, D in the tenor, G, double that root in the alto, and then finally finish off with the third in the soprano. And there's our triad right there. Okay, chord 6 now, the triads E, G, B. And we're going to see what works in terms of doubling and what doesn't. So we've got an E in the bass. Now we have the option to potentially double the root. The previous chord, the D in the tenor, simply rises by step to that E, so that's quite nice. If we were to double the third, the G, it would drop that tenor down. It will come down by quite a significant leap. So perhaps we're going to rather double the root in this case. So we're going to go up to an E. And then we're going to simply finish off the chord with the alto staying constant in G, and then our soprano staying constant as a B. Of course, we should always make sure that our stems are facing the correct way. Alright, so there we've got a nice 1 chord followed by its secondary substitute, chord 6. For this next section, quickly, we're going to do chord 4 to 2 in first inversion. So chord 4, the triad is C, E, G. And chord 2, the triad is A, C, E. This time starting on the C. So here we go, C. And now if this were a progression, we would want to keep it constant. Again, I want you to think beyond that. For now, just that it's a separate bar in itself. So we're going to go C, E, G, and then double the root at the top. There's C at the top there. In fact, let me make this a double bar line just so we can see that separation. Chord 2, now remembering that we must start on the third. And in this case, we want to double that third as far as possible. I can already see that that's going to happen at the top. So let's keep our E constant. We simply rise our alto by step to the A. And then double our third in the soprano. Again, making sure that our stems are facing the correct way. Quickly, let's have a listen to this progression. And as you can hear, it immediately wants to go to probably chord 5 in this case, and then potentially resolve. So it's a bit of an incomplete progression, but again, just treating it bar by bar. So if we listen one more time to chord 1, 1 to 6, you'll hear quite a nice movement, but there's a lot of similarity. And then pay special attention to chord 4, followed by its secondary substitute 2, especially since it's in first inversion, sharing the same bass note. It's actually quite hard to hear a difference there. Have a listen again. And there we go. Secondary substitutes, a basic guide, just dealing with chord 6 and chord 2. There are more complex substitution chords, but that is for a later video. A final thought on chord 2, and the 2 chord especially, is that you should never use it as a substitute for chord 4 in the context of a plagal cadence, because then it wouldn't be a plagal cadence. So that's just a final little bit of information for you to remember. Thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, maybe hitting that subscribe button. If you didn't, a dislike, no problem at all. I hope you have a great day further, and I'll see you on the next one. Goodbye.